the patient came to you and they said, how much is my diet going to impact my fertility? What would be your answer?
Well, I don't recall anyone ever asking that question, and I never asked them what they ate anyway. By reducing the plants, increasing the fat, eating less frequently, to reduce the microbial fermentation in our guts. So healthy people not reproducing, I then ask them, well, what do you eat? And the answer is, I eat healthy. But I will tell you that the most important thing is mindset. The mind is the master. As you say, so shall ye be. Meditation, prayer, positivity, and we're at service and helping each other. And that's it. And then I found the diet and I'm like, whoa, amazing.
Tell me who you are and what you do.
Who am I? My name is Rob Kiltz. I'm a physician, a fertility doctor, and my main job is making babies. I own and run CNY fertility centers. I call it the Walmart of IVF. Basically, we're the lowest cost fertility center in America. And we integrate Eastern and Western medicine, acupuncture, massage, nutrition, mindset, to help people conceive and deliver babies naturally first. And if it's not working, incorporate assisted reproductive technologies like in vitro fertilization. And I love the keto carnivore world, the faith and fantastic world, and so I integrate these into my life every day.
How do you make the distinction between natural and, let's just say, extra natural, or I don't know how you'd say? Like,
natural conception would be you didn't need a doctor to help you have a baby with either IUI or IVF. Although in some ways you might need some help with ovulation, but if we can help you ovulate and you conceive through a natural intercourse, that would be sort of the natural way.
Gotcha. How did you ultimately find you wanted to get into this space?
Oh, how did I find I wanted to get into this space? Fertility space.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking
Fertility, for sure.
Yeah, well.
Or do you want to go back a little further?
Well, medicine in general. I grew up in Los Angeles, kicked out of school in a gang, couldn't read, father in jail was my basic elevator speech. I worked at Dodger Stadium, go Dodgers. Obviously, they've just won the series twice in a row. Excited about that. But I broke a leg at 19 and I met a hippie doctor and I thought, wow, this is cool. I wonder what it takes to do that. Now,
and at the time that you broke your leg, all of this other stuff is in play that you just now described.
Yeah, I was, I didn't have much of an education that gave me the direction to go into medicine or science at all.
That's a big distance from you meet a doctor after breaking your leg to the setup you had as far as you're talking about with your adolescence, right? What actually got you into going all the way into medicine?
Well, I had no mentors to go into medicine or even go to college. And in high school, pre-high school, I found myself in a gang, kicked out of school, and I couldn't read. And I had an inability to read since I was much younger. I had migraines and bowel problems and ADHD, you want to name it. But I had amazing parents that somehow let my brother and I just kind of roam the streets and we survived. In high school, I took a ceramics class and Mrs. Wong taught me pottery. And at 16, I bought a potter's wheel. I started doing art shows and I found something I was good at. Now, interesting enough, I might not have been able to read, nor could I comprehend what I read, but I was really good at math. But I didn't go to math class, so I failed it in high school. And I went on to junior college. I took ceramics and painting and calligraphy. And I thought maybe I wanted to go into business or political science, but I had no real idea. I took a political science class and I hated it basically. And I broke a leg at 19 and I was on a go-kart built by a nephew who forgot to put brakes on it. And I was going down a hill in Los Angeles and it was a pretty steep hill. And in order to stop it, I put my foot down and the rear axle, boom, broke it.
Ouch.
Best thing that ever happened to me. Through that, at at Children's Hospital on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, I met a doctor who was caring for me. He was, long hair. I call him a hippie doctor. And I was like, wow, this really seems like a cool profession. And I went to the counselor's office. I went to Los Angeles City College out of high school, not knowing what the heck I wanted to do. It cost me about $1.50 a semester because it was just cheap as heck. I mentioned I worked at Dodger Stadium for a year, and then I worked at a Broadway department store, and I began to learn service for others, sales. And when I went to the counselor's office and realized, wow, this is going to be hard to be a doctor, but I was really driven to do something I wanted to do. And the beauty was there was a lot of science and math in order to be a doctor, and I was really good at math. And so it took me 4 years of junior college, and then I went to USC. And I didn't get into medical school the first year, but I'm persistent, hardworking, dedicated. And even though I didn't do well in most of my English and history classes, I aced pretty much everything else. And I worked at the Los Angeles Free Clinic. I did research in undergrad in nutritional biochemistry, which was an interesting background that I had, and not knowing where I'd be today in this nutritional world. I got into medical school the second time I applied, and I thought I wanted to go into primary care medicine. But I loved what the OB/GYN doctors were doing. I'm a mechanic. Basically, I built furniture, I would build cars, and I was a grease monkey as a kid. That was my beauty. My father owned tune-up shops in LA, and he allowed us to tear apart cars and rebuild them. And so I'm a basic mechanic. And OB/GYN is delivering babies, which is the best thing ever in the world. And in medical school at UC Davis, I loved the delivering of babies and caring for women. And that's how I ended up in the OB/GYN world. And after I finished my residency at University of Colorado, practiced for a year in Sacramento, and I met a doc who was doing fertility, and he was teaching me. And one day someone called me up, just cold call, and said, hey, do you want to do a fellowship in fertility? And I was like, sure.
Do you mind if I ask, about what age were you at this time?
I was in I was about 32. I always go back. My daughter was born when I was 32, and that was just in my residency. So it took me 6 years of undergrad and then a year before I got into medical school. So kind of puts timeline a little different.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of people in the chair you're sitting in, and your story is so striking for the incredible amount of persistence you have against, I've never heard I don't think I've heard a story of you, not even of somebody I've interviewed, but just in general. You really had it in your mind you were going to be a doctor, and in spite of a background and environment and everything else that was working against you hard, including what you were just describing, dyslexia and so many of these other things, you were just hell-bent on making this thing happen.
Suffering is strengthening, I've learned. And I have a lot of faith in God and the understanding of the faith within all of us, and the persistence and the power. Even through failures, we can do anything. And both my grandfathers committed suicide. I never knew them, but I knew their story. I saw my grandmothers through hardship, but I also saw my parents, who are amazing people. My mother, Maria, despite my father's faults and failures and hardships, always stood by him, loved her family. And my sister, Mary Ann, who is one of my inspirations in life, she had diabetes since age 4. And I saw the suffering that my mother went through and my sister went through. Eventually, my sister dies at 52 of diabetes and heart failure. And I have other stories that kind of go with that. And I saw the suffering. And in the midst of her suffering and me working to go to medical school, she had a child at a young age. And I remember her C-section and helping her with that. But seeing my parents, despite my father was a serial entrepreneur, and I called him a serial failure. But despite that, and despite going to jail for a year, he was loving, kind, and persistent. And why some of us have the suffering we have and others don't, that's the mystery in all of this. And I think if I can look back at my life, I saw my suffering of my parents and my sister and my older brother, who's an amazing guy. I think that there was depression in the family, and I know my father had claimed he had alcohol problems, and I think seeing all of this, I wanted to be the peacemaker, despite the fact that I was kicked out of school and again couldn't read. And I think my suffering had a lot to do with my diet, and that may tie into a lot of what we're talking about, because I had migraines and I couldn't read, because when they'd ask me to read in front of the class, the letters would just jump off the page, and I would become dizzy. I remember this. But I was kind of the teacher's pet in the sense that I always wanted to help the teacher. And in the 4th grade, Mrs. Hafner, she embarrassed me. She kissed me in front of the class and hugged me. And she'd be arrested today, but way back when, it was simply an acknowledgement for the fact that I could solve math problems that no one else could. And I didn't know that because I was just couldn't read, and I was always distracted. And recess, just wanted to go out and run a football and play baseball, and never academic in any way. But when I went to junior college and realized, well, I need these grades, and I was just, I would work at the Broadway department store. Every evening I'd work, and Saturdays and Sundays, and then I would do the studying in order to get the grades in order to keep me moving forward. And in some ways, I never thought I wanted to go into medicine until I met someone that inspired me. I never thought I wanted to go into OBGYN and fertility until I met someone that inspired me, and then I get a cold call that says, hey, do you want to do this?
Right. So let's get back to that.
Yeah.
You get this call. It sounds like you're ready for exactly this call, because it was already something you were excited about.
Well, I loved Los Angeles, and I wanted to get back to LA. My parents were there. My wife at the time's parents were there. Her father had just died, and I had a young child, and I wanted to get back there. And I think what it did was it got me to an area of medicine that fertility. I wasn't really thinking, wow, this is really my passion for the rest of my life, but it became that. And I was a worker, and I loved the prospect of helping people. I wouldn't say that I truly understood what I understand today about the human body and the science of the mind and the food we eat, but I was inspired to help people. And I found that nothing better than helping build families. And I have my one child who now just had her first child. I tell her of 10, but she's not convinced yet. But I feel very blessed and lucky. And I see so many people that are suffering more and more today. And interesting enough, when I was in my residency, I did a year of internal medicine first, by the way. That was another sort of notch that sent me a different way first. And I found that I really enjoyed internal medicine. I saw a lot of suffering in internal medicine that I didn't quite understand, and I wanted to get back to being a mechanic, which is obstetrics and gynecology, helping deliver babies and helping heal. There's a lot of surgical components to gynecology, and I really enjoyed that. And then after my fellowship in Los Angeles, the riots had hit. I had a young child, and it's like, maybe I don't want to live here anymore. We got to go out and look at something else. That was it. And God wasn't saying, hey, this is bad. God was saying, hey, let's go a different route. And interesting enough, I wound up taking a job in Berkeley, Northern California for a couple of years. I worked for another doc, and I found that I didn't like fertility world. And I missed the general obstetrics and gynecology of primary care for women and delivering babies. And I wound up moving to upstate New York, little town. on a lake. And I worked for another OBGYN practice where I helped deliver babies and back to being a mechanic in a sense, surgical approaches and medical approaches. And then I get fired. And I was like, okay, now what do I do? And I'm 41 now. And upstate New York, which isn't my home where I grew up, although my parents are from Brooklyn. So I have a little bit of New York roots. And that's when I decided to just start my own practice. I did obstetrics, gynecology, and started a fertility business, and decided that I wanted to go off on my own and do something different. But there was more suffering to come because running your own practice is hard. I went through separation, divorce, depression. That's when I began to notice arthritis and migraines and bowel bleeding and kidney stones and difficulty in running a practice and running a marriage and raising a child and searching for new and different ideas of how to incorporate other things in practice. And I began to incorporate mindfulness, meditation, prayer, acupuncture in my business, my practice of medicine, and mostly because I needed it. And through these modalities, I introduced them in my medical practice. I created a healing arts practice where we would bring in an acupuncturist, massage therapist, and yoga practices, and I would do seminars and retreats on mindfulness and things like this. And this was 20 plus years ago. And I
mean, it's funny, you've already described a journey into Western medicine, then taking in a number of things you've already listed off that come a bit more on the East, but also a little bit on the Orthodox side. It sounds like you've just got every tool in the toolbox that you're trying to get a hold of for possible means.
Well, but it's interesting because I was going through a divorce and separation, and I have one child, and my daughter didn't want to talk to me, and it was very difficult. A friend of mine was a Buddhist, Craig Humphrey, and he's since passed to cancer, an amazing guy, but he taught me a lot about philosophy and meditation and prayer, which is something I did not practice at the time. I'm a scientist. You show me the science and I will give you the answer. I didn't have faith and belief in God, whatever you might think it is. And so through the hardship of suffering, he guided me to learn more about mindfulness and the practices of yoga and acupuncture. An acupuncturist called me one day and said, Dr. Kiltz, I'm seeing a bunch of your patients doing acupuncture. Are you interested in learning about it? And I'm like, I don't know what the heck that is, but sure. And this was 20-ish plus years ago. And I went and met Heather, the acupuncturist, and I'm like, she put some needles in me, and I'm like, okay, what is this? But I began to look more deeply at these things because I was suffering, and I was looking for something to help myself, but I also saw the suffering of those that are infertile, either miscarriages or not getting pregnant, and I know the value of a child, even though the hardships I was having with my child. And I have one child, and she was felt like my best friend at the time. And depression and loneliness and sadness when your only child doesn't even see you anymore. That was very difficult. And I would go to therapy. But as I incorporated mindfulness and meditation and prayer and begin to incorporate these things, and then one day, some of my patients were adding diet, paleo diet, and getting pregnant. And I'm like, okay, now I'm the doctor, and I know the science, and what you're doing doesn't make any sense. Now, again, I was arthritis, migraines, bowel bleeding. This is
2010?
It's about 20 years ago. Okay. I put it all about 20 years ago. I started my practice 30 years ago. And that's when the rocky road start kind of pushing me around a little bit. And the largest insurance company in America dropped me as a center of excellence because my numbers were no good. More on that story. And getting fired from a job and having to figure out, okay, I got to start my own practice. And I had no business knowledge at all. And how am I going to do this? And so I drew up a business plan. It has to do because I'm a math guy. I took an Excel spreadsheet. I put together a business plan and went to the bank. I said,
"You're preaching to the choir."
Here it is.
I'm all about the spreadsheets.
It's also, I'm an Excel spreadsheet master, and through my fellowship and other things I really learned. But it really is. I always say it's through hardship we build a strong ship, and suffering is part of the journey. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. And when you open up to the possibilities of the things that show up, and so something showed up, I would look at it from all different angles, just like getting pregnant with paleo diet. And part of my reason for integrating acupuncture, massage, meditation is because the majority of people were so stressed out from the journey, they quit. And I already know that quitting doesn't get you where you want to go. It's staying in the game. And if I can find ways to reduce your stress, cortisol, epinephrine down, serotonin, oxytocin up, science, then maybe I can keep you in the game. Plus, about the same time, Rhonda Byrne's book, The Secret, came out, and I'm like, became a crazy man on power positivity. Plus, I should back up. When I broke my leg and I was a full-length cast for 3 months, I got bored of the television. I started reading. And I became a voracious reader.
Which is a radical departure of where you were from before, given what you were saying.
Well, I've used the word dyslexia, or I couldn't read, but I use it very loosely because I had a medical problem due to, I believe, my diet that caused me to have brain dyslexia and the ability to read. Plus, reading isn't even natural anyway. We're oracles. We like to hear and see the story. And then I found audiobooks also, but I became a voracious reader. And plus, I just took more time to know it. And so my trajectory of where I am in life is just move it forward a little bit. And that's, my journey. But
I get the sense where you're taking us is that's why at the point where you're getting introduced to paleo through patients who are telling you that they're getting more fertile because of the diet. I'm guessing you went on a reading journey, right?
I went on a voracious reading journey because I'm like, come on. If you're doing something that's helping you get pregnant, I need to know about that. Just like I wanted to know about the things that help reduce cortisol and epinephrine that helped you on your journey. Many people got pregnant naturally on that. But then I'm finding another modality, which is, you mean a diet matters? Here, I'm an Italian heritage, and I love all the pizza and pasta and the bread and the salad and all those things. And then suddenly paleo, what is paleo? And I need to learn about it. And then from paleo, I found keto, and then bang, I found some ripped dude that only ate meat and didn't exercise. And I'm like, okay, that one's for me. I was a meat eater all the time, but so I'm a scientist and a spiritualist. I want to understand the story, and I want to understand the science as best I can, because my job is to find something that'll help you get pregnant either naturally or, if with assistance, improve your odds. And that's my true journey of life.
So the you of before you were even hearing about paleo, if a patient came to you and they said, how much is my diet going to impact my fertility? What would be your answer?
Well, I don't recall anyone ever asking that question, and I never asked them what they ate anyway.
That makes sense.
And so it wasn't in my wheelhouse. But interesting enough, I was a nutritional biochemistry major and did research in the nutritional biochemistry field in my undergrad at USC with Dr. Medusky. But it was interesting because the research I did was on supplements and things like that on rats. So, did I learn the real biochemistry? I don't know that answer, but yeah, here I am like, wow, Diet matters.
I forgot who I had on, but it was somebody else who'd gone through medical school, and we were on the topic of nutrition, and he was saying, well, actually there was a little bit of nutrition classes, but it's like both the doctors in the class and just the whole school kind of treat it as a, hey, here's a little side thing that you could check into if you want, if you're interested. But it's nice, it's a nice to have.
Yeah, but now I look at it, and the truth is they didn't know what they're talking about anyway. And that's kind of my general approach to diet. The question is, why do some people get sick and other people don't? We don't know.
Yeah.
My grandmother lived to 104. She smoked Pall Malls and drank Manhattans. And my sister ate a very, very strict diet and worked very hard to keep her diabetes in control. She gets heart failure and dies at 52. She went blind before that, kidney problems, all sorts of things. This is the mystery that we just don't know why some people and not others.
But it's important because it is true. I think all of us, as we're growing up and we're hearing about, hey, this person got Alzheimer's, and oh goodness, this person had a heart attack. Oh, he seems young to have had a heart attack. I think that reinforces what you just said, which is that there's this kind of sense that, well, so much of this is just luck of the draw. You got to just work with what you got. I have a smoker uncle who made it into their mid 80s. So, I mean, smoking's a thing, but is it really that big of a deal?
10% of people who smoke cigarettes get lung cancer. 90% do not. But my bet is the majority of those get something related to tobacco and smoking, depending how much and how frequently and things like that.
Right.
But ultimately, our ability to predict who and what and when they're going to get something is just really poor.
Because there's still so much that's in the unknown.
And
but I certainly, I would say this myself, which is that the me of 10 years ago, and I think I've even said on this podcast several times, if you were to ask me how much is health related to diet and exercise, I'd be like, well, it's probably like 40% diet, 60% exercise, But even then, a lot of things like brain diseases are, genetics. What do you do? A lot of this is related to genetics. The me of today, I'm above 80% on diet. Like, I think what you're eating, and it's not a short span of time. It's over time. It's having a lot to do with what your body does with what you eat too.
What you put in the mind and the mouth matters most. But the truth is, we just don't know. Genetically, we're not birds and we're not fish. We're land animals. And so we're meant to live on the land, not underwater and not in the air in general, but we're searching for answers. And that's part of the beauty of this. We're having conversations, trying to sort of tease out some of these things. I mean, for me, I went carnivore at 55. I'll be 70 in March. I've never felt better. Am I strict? No. Sometimes I have a French fry or Kiltz's ice cream, and very rarely a martini. And the only green vegetable I eat is a blue cheese stuffed olive. But that's not all the time. It's rare times. And my belief is the more we can lead with our mindset more than anything, because so many of us worry. We worry about tomorrow, but our ability in medicine to predict who and when and why is not very good. So you want to live your life as kind and joyful as you can, do good to others as you would want them to do unto you, which is probably the best thing. Eat less frequently and put a smile on your face every day.
Yeah.
See you later.
Definitely, I'm a big fan of the positivity component. I often have kind of a gut check against it for me, myself, because I'm used to thinking of me as a person as very friendly. It's very service oriented, in that I'm like, this whole science journey is very much a pay it forward, for me. And I was trying to explain this to my engineer friends, because from their perspective, this is just a big expensive habit that, or hobby, as they would put it. I'm going, don't get me wrong, I go through a lot of anguish on it, but there really is a fulfillment that can't easily be described when you feel like you're doing something for a greater cause.
Service is what we're here for, to help others. Money in the bank never grows anything. It's meant to be put into the system and help people. It's meant to be spent, but not spent on worthless things, but on positive things that help humanity. And I think what you're doing is investing in human health and wellness. And the more we can all do that together, never chase money, but the mission is what we're really, we want to say chasing, but in fact, it gives us immense joy to be part of this journey community-wise, because we're working to heal our brothers and sisters who are suffering. And I saw, my parents lived to 93. Did they exercise? Nope. Did they once smoke and drink? Yeah, long ago. They had some problems, and my mother had a stroke from a fall, hit her head. And but she was the most positive woman. My father was a very positive guy too, but they all had problems. Yet I find that they ate, I would say mostly I'm going to use the word Mediterranean, whole foods diet. They didn't eat junk food. They cooked at home, and they were very family oriented. And I think those sort of things are very valuable. I personally am biased towards the paleo, keto, carnivore lifestyle. But, these are all conversations for us to continue to search and figure that out.
Well, and this is something else I've also talked about a lot on here is, while I say, 80% diet when looking at in comparison to, say, exercise or something like that, acknowledging both are important. I think diet culture, it gets way too little attention. For example, when going to Europe, food is spaced out a lot more. When you do have a meal, it's a longer span of time and you're eating over a slower. The portions are obviously very different, but beyond even the portions, it's how you're treating it, right? The ritual aspect of it. What you were talking about with your parents, for example, cooking their food at home. I think that there's a good reason why a lot of science shows that if you're cooking your food at home, beyond what you actually make, the experience itself and what that involves is going to bring around a lot of mindfulness. And I think that's very relevant to our health.
Yeah, I think this community that we're developing within the online social media is radically different than I grew up with. It is quite an amazing connection. And the beauty is we have people like yourself and many others that are searching for answers and ideas. None of us know the answer, but part of this is the community that we're developing. And if you have a cookie, cake, or ice cream, sometimes I wouldn't lose your shirt over it. And I just got back from Europe. You didn't have 3 to 6 meals a day. You had a beautiful light breakfast. You had a beautiful moderate dinner. It was all, in a beautiful restaurant we went to, but it felt like a home cooked meal.
But it wasn't a drive-through where you're just barely getting the bag of food and you're eating it out of your car in a hurry because you got to make this meeting that's in 18 minutes. Something along those lines. It's just a different life. I feel like anytime I leave here and I go to Europe, they've got problems of their own, don't get me wrong. But with regard to food culture, I often feel like you could just throw a dart at the map of the world, and odds are, outside the United States, they're doing it just a little bit better in how they do the food. That's how I feel often.
Well, I agree with you. Interesting. So we were just in Lisbon, Madrid, and Barcelona, and I would have a croissant, beautiful French-ish croissant with lots of butter. And there was always a lot of butter and fat in the meal, which I think is one of our biggest problems. We are consuming a low-fat diet because everyone's afraid of fat. And the single leading thing that we've been recommending, and this is getting back to my profession, okay, the science of medicine, and the American College of OBGYN recommends fruit, fiber, vegetables, seeds, nuts, lean meat, little to no red meat. A little bit of fake meat is okay. And they recommend red wine for pregnant and lactating women.
Wait, I didn't know. Wait, what are you saying?
The American College of OBGYN has an expert opinion paper out about 3 years ago. And part of the dietary recommendation includes red wine.
Really?
It does.
I've never heard this before. Like, I'm pretty sure I would have perked up like I'm doing now if I'd heard this.
My next talk.
Okay.
That essentially, we have to remember that reproduction is the most important thing of life. And the women are suffering. Number one, polycystic ovarian syndrome is younger and younger. Endometriosis is on the rise. Uterine fibroids. We had to remove a large fibroid for my daughter before she'd conceive and deliver a baby naturally. Many other disorders of the reproductive system in men and women, including bad sperm, bad eggs, diminished ovarian reserve, is on the rise. The question is why? Well, the experts of the world, and certainly in America, recommend primarily a plant-based, low animal fat diet, little to no red meat. Chicken, fish, turkey, okay, lots of fruits and vegetables, much as you want. And yes, the recommendation is red wine. Exactly why? I don't know that answer. I think a lot of it is sort of we want to appease everyone in the food manufacturing world, in the sales world. And I grew up on red wine and had small amounts of it. I've never very much. But our biggest problem isn't the drinking of beer and wine. It's the fermentation of the plants and protein in our gut, which actually makes alcohol. And so what we don't realize is that most of us and our children are running around with alcohol in their bloodstream from fermentation of the food we eat due to the microbes in our gut. And when you look more at this, James Henry Salisbury did a lot of the work where he showed that the proliferation of the bacterium yeast was great in the digestive system. And he switched to a mostly meat-based diet, and they healed. And I believe the same thing can happen with women and men by reducing the plants, increasing the fat, eating less frequently to reduce the microbial fermentation in our guts. Because the microbes go out the rectum anus. And where do they go now? For women, they go in the vagina, the cervix, the uterus, the tubes, and the ovaries. So what if the majority of our problems were bacterial and yeast overgrowth in our gut? So why is a paleo, keto, and carnivore diet valuable? Because when you add fat, it suppresses the microbes in the gut. Ever notice that butter never molds?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't usually have it for quite that long, but I cannot think of a single time I've seen moldy butter.
Right. And so fat, adipose tissue, and butter products. Now, again, milk is different. Cheeses are different. But the fat suppresses microbial growth. Now, do you want to have a high microbial growth or a low microbial growth? Again, microbes, bacteria and yeast, are the microbes we use to ferment yogurt, kefir, cheeses, and beer and wine, and other spirits, right? So our gut is a perfect anaerobic environment, which has a lot of what in it? Digesting plants, right? We know we have a high microbial growth because everyone talks about the microbiome and how good and important it is for you. 20 million people a year die from microbial infections around the globe. And it actually may be heart disease, cancers, certainly pelvic infections, esophageal, and think about all of our pharyngeal, tonsil infections and upper and lower respiratory infections, common, right? Mm-hmm. And many of them are viral. They don't necessarily respond well to antibiotics or antifungal, but we know they're very common. And so this is why I believe that eating less frequently and adding more fat might be the single leading thing you can do to reduce microbial fermentation in your gut that makes, so when you make alcohol, you make methane gas, heat. What does heat do to your cells? Damages them.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's one of the concerns with fever, certainly.
That's right. So long-term fevers are not good, but think about the amount of 3 to 6 plant-based meals a day since the day you're born to the day you die. How much fermentation is happening? Tremendous. Schizophrenia, psychosis, depression, anxiety, suicidality, criminality, all may be secondary to chronic auto brewery syndrome, which is chronic low levels of alcohol. Is alcohol a poison to your cells?
I mean,
it's a toxin.
Yeah, it's why the liver's got it at the top of the oxidative priority list, right?
Well, I think alcohol is a direct toxin to the liver.
Well, yeah. What I'm saying is that's my understanding, and this I'm taking this from the Emmerichs. They talk about oxidative priority, but that methanol, I believe, it's
a poison and not your energy,
right?
Because it's not meant to be in there anyway. So when we say alcohol is your primary, is not. I'm just giving you my opinion. I question everything. We have to think that all science, I don't care if it's standard, keto, carnivore, it's all questionable.
100%.
It's all theoretical. I'm giving you Kiltz's theory. Endometriosis is chronic pelvic endometritis. Is it normal to have bacteria in your bloodstream?
I don't know the answer.
Well, what bug would you like floating around in your bloodstream?
Yeah, that's the thing. At this point, this is a bit outside my wheelhouse. But to the extent to where there's the quote unquote good and bad bacteria, as far as what actually can be detected, yes, I would assume that that's predominantly going to be in your gut. To whatever's determined to be good or not. I don't know of a anyway.
Name a military that's good or bad. It depends.
Right.
So microbes, good or bad based on what? We've given us a label of something that might not be true. Which bacteria do you want living in your brain? 0. They might be there from time to time, but they're there because the gut is chronically contaminated with bacteria, yeast, and viruses since the day you're born to the day you die. Because in general, the common human diet today is 3 to 6 meals a day filled with plants and lean meat. And if you think about it, what animal cooks their food?
Just us.
Just us. So did we evolve on cooked food or raw food? Most likely.
I mean, if we're going to the Homo sapiens, I would like to assume it's been predominantly cooked. But
were you there?
I don't know.
How much did you cook it? I mean, how long were you going to leave it there?
Yeah, good question.
And again, I don't. My bet is we might have had fire, but when you killed that animal, if you did not put it in your gut fast, someone else was going to do that, and it might have been another animal. Now I'm just throwing out ideas. Pottinger's cats, really great story. How Pottinger studied cats. He fed them either raw meat or cooked meat, raw milk or pasteurized milk. And he found that the cats were healthier on raw meat and raw milk. Now, we're not cats. I'll go with that one. But we're not rats either. And a lot of studies are done on rats. And so I just try to go back and imagine if another animal or another human was going to fight for that food, there's only one place that food is safe, in your gut, because it must be digestible right there. So if in fact, maybe some of our problems are cooked meat, because what happens to the fat when you cook the meat?
Well, of course, it can be oxidized.
It's rendered.
Right.
It drips away. And especially, I mean, did you have an iron pan 20,000 years ago, or you just thrown it on the fire? So much of the fat did what? It melted away, right? It melted into the ashes with the water and made what? Soap. So it's, again, I don't know the answer. I just questioning. Is cooked meat better than raw meat? And if so, tell me why. Because if you took all of the wood, the lumber that built this house, and before you built the house, you made charcoal out of it, is it stronger or weaker? Are you damaging the molecular bonds of the food you eat, along with the molecular structure of the protein, amino acids, sugars, and fatty acids that may not have the same value, or you might be damaging some of the minerals and vitamins that your body requires because you cook them.
So is it your hypothesis that we likely didn't have as much cooked meat, let's say going back, and I'm just picking on Homo sapiens right now, the last 200,000 years, right? Would you say that you would guess that there might be less cooked meat relative to raw meat consumed?
I don't know those answers specifically because I don't, when we carbon date something and we find a hearth and you're going to tell me you can say that absolutely you cooked the meat before you ate it? And how much did you eat raw or cooked? I don't know that answer.
I agree. I'm with you.
And so all I'm saying is that we have to look at all sides of this and be open-minded. The biggest problem is we're eating a low-fat diet. When you cook meat, the fat is rendered. Rendered fat is not the same as raw fat. Adipose tissue, that means the fat on our body, is it good for us or bad for us? Is it healthy or is it the cause of disease? I believe the most important organ system of our body is actually adipose tissue. It's the healthiest and most important cells of your body. Everyone focuses on muscles, but if you have no fat, you're dead. And since you and I likely spent maybe days or weeks hunting for food and had no lunch bucket, no delivery service, there's only one fuel for the mitochondria, and that's fat. I believe sugar, glucose is not the mitochondrial energy ever. And so I imagine we went a long time without food. If you look at wolves and look at many other organisms, they go a long time without eating. I did a 15-day fast. I never felt better in my life. No food, no calories, nothing. And I'm not recommending it for everyone, although I would recommend you do a trial of fasting. Fat must be our energy. Plus, a bear that hibernates for 6 months eats no food. They gestate 1 to 4 little baby bears. They lose no bone mass and no muscle mass. They lose only one thing: adipose tissue. So what is in an adipocyte? A cell, your fat cell. It contains fat, sugars, protein, minerals, and vitamins. So it contains all the building blocks for that little baby, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely adipose tissue. Now you're in my wheelhouse. I love that.
I love the wheelhouse.
And for what it's worth, I love that for all this time in medicine, it was kind of thought of as this like cold storage area, when now it's so strongly recognized as an extremely vibrant endocrine organ that's very wired in to the whole system. But you're exactly right. The development of subcutaneous fat, of having these giant stores. I remember the first time I was learning about this was that, the glycogen stores in the liver, it's just 100 grams. It's 100 grams. So you have about 400 calories in total. That's at a topped off glycogen stores of the liver. But looking at it from a calorie perspective, you have as much as like 100,000 calories in somebody like you or I in our subcutaneous fat. Now, granted, the mobilizing of glycogen is way faster than it is the mobilizing of fat, but that depends on how fat adapted you are. So getting the fat out of the adipose tissue, out of the sac and so forth, that can be a little more of a process relative to glycogen, but it's also much smaller. It's also for the, amount of ATP it packs and everything else.
Have you ever seen anyone with a 0 triglycerides, LDL, HDL?
Nope. And I never will.
That's correct. So I believe the story is different. It's my theory. Okay. So glycosylation, what is it?
It's the release of the it's the process of
So I never heard of glycosylation, or I did, but I didn't understand it. We know what glycation is. Glycation is the addition of a sugar onto a substance, mostly proteins and lipids, that cause damage to the cell and or the machinery of the cell to cause dysfunction. Hemoglobin A1C, for one. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the DNA.
Isn't that technically glycation, though, in the case of A1C?
So glycation is the addition of a sugar. So hemoglobin A1C is the added sugar onto the hemoglobin particles of the red cell. Mm. Okay? It just causes, and we measure that and we define diabetes if you have an elevated hemoglobin A1C, which tells us that you have insulin resistance. Now, I'm going to give you my story. I think it's something different personally, but we know that if you continue with a high hemoglobin A1C, you're likely to get capillary and vascular damage, which leads to organ system damage and failure. My sister lost her vision, a kidney, eventually her life, due to the glycation and the damage to the heart cells. Okay? So glycosylation is a different process. That's the normal addition of a sugar onto a protein or a fat post-translational modification of a protein. So
gotcha.
DNA tells RNA to make a protein. This happens in the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi apparatus, the ribosomes. So, but once you make a protein, now what? Is it functional? Well, the majority of proteins are not functional until they've been post-translationally modified. 99% of proteins are modified, either glycosylation, phosphorylation, methylation, oxidation, and there are many other additions of molecules to change the shape, the function, the pH, or whether or not it's soluble in water or not. And so
this is all part of the protein folding.
It's correct.
Right.
Folding and charge changing.
Right.
So
you could, for the layperson, this is a manufacturing process that's going on.
And every cell of your body.
Yeah, every nucleated cell, but yeah.
Yes, except the platelet doesn't do it and the red cell doesn't do it. See, my theory of the red cell, once it's made, it has a lifespan like a battery. It doesn't use glucose for energy. It's basically, once its time is run out, it's taken to the recycle bin in the spleen, okay? And so it doesn't have a mitochondria either. So ultimately, the red cell has a hemoglobin, which is oxygen binding, and it has a lifespan like everything. Your car. Do you have your car you've had for 20 years? I mean, very few people do. Everything degrades over time. Heat, oxidation, light, many things affect it. Even eating food has an effect on oxidation and glycation. So now, well, how many sugars are in the human body? 9. They're critical for glycosylation and the glycocalyx, which is basically the layer of a cell that is the transmitter and receiver or the barcode of the cell. So your blood type is determined by a sugar, not a protein. Your human leukocyte antigen, which is the thing that says self or non-self, is determined by a sugar layer. And so the protein is lined up with these amino acids, and then sugars are attached to the amino acids, either the N or the O portion of the amino acids, or it's attached to the lipid portion, which gives it its function. And since we're eating a high sugar-based diet, since the day you're born to the day you die, you're highly exposed to a lot of foreign sugars, which glycate. Now, this is where I think most of us don't understand the glycosylation, the glycocalyx, and the importance of the glycobiome. We're focused on the microbiome, and I've never measured glycogen. Glycogen is a glycoprotein. That means there's a sugar and a protein also in it. And I believe that glycogen is mostly important for glycosylation. So how many proteins are you kicking out at this very moment right now? Every cell of your body.
Yeah, I have no idea.
How fast? Speed of light. Because our neurotransmitters are glycoproteins. There's a sugar moiety and there's a protein moiety. Without the sugar, it doesn't work. And without the right sugars. And so when you expose your body to a tremendous amount of sugar for a certain amount of time, it causes damage to those neurotransmitters. That's why a keto and carnivore-genic diets help people with depression and schizophrenia and psychosis and many other diseases. It's because it reduces the sugar damage to the neurotransmitters. See, I don't believe it's a mitochondrial problem because we have plenty of ATP, but there's something else being damaged. And that's the part that I'm mostly interested in, an area that I had never heard of the glycobiome or the glycocalyx. And I didn't know that your blood type is determined by a sugar, not by a protein.
Yeah, I didn't know that one either. I'm familiar with the glycocalyx. Actually chat about that a bit on the podcast. But frankly, that's just because it comes back to a subject I'm closer to with atherosclerosis.
Well, the glycocalyx is the most critical part of every cell because just take the gut. The gut's glycocalyx, when it's damaged, you expose the epithelial cells to the negative charged particles that are in the gut, which attach to the epithelium. Positive, negative charges attach, and that stimulates the immune system. It stimulates histamine release and macrophage attraction and all the things that cause the inflammation. It's the damage to the glycocalyx. You live in a very beautiful neighborhood. There are lots of plants. Mm-hmm. Take the plants away. And is there life? There's very little life. Well, it's interesting that the plants actually determine the environment of the life forms that live there. And depending on whether they're just small shrubs, small grasses on the shore, which begin to take over, and then larger plants begin to grow, and conifers and all sorts of things grow in. They bring different life forms, but much of it is because they hold the water in. Water is critical for life. Plants, once water falls onto the ground, the water is then sucked into the plants where it basically has a little bit like of a battery flow, right? Electrical energy flow. And they have electromolecular energy that's critical to the processes. So every cell of our body has a sugar layer that essentially plays a similar function. The majority of the water in your body is actually held in the glycocalyx. When there's a charge change, the water is released. And that's one of the reasons you get diarrhea, or you get third spacing, or you might get pulmonary edema. You might get heart failure because the glycocalyx, and as you mentioned, I think you were alluding to, the glycocalyx of the vessels are one of the reasons that when the damage happens, it causes heart disease. It causes all sorts of capillary and vascular damage.
There's a lot of debate. So to be sure, it's fascinating because some people believe it's just that. Some people believe it's a majority of that. Some believe it's more of a side effect of just less healthy cells,
Well,
of endothelial cells. There's no question though that there's a physiological value to the glycocalyx that's high, right?
I believe it's the most important thing we're not talking about.
You may be right on that.
Because if we pulled up, I grew up in Los Angeles, and after a fire hit and there were no more plants, when it rained or anytime, the hillsides all came down. So think about the glycocalyx, like the roots of the plants that hold the dirt in place, which is the epithelium. And plus there's a charge, and plus they hold the water. Is water important? Because one of the biggest problems we see with many of these diseases is we see swelling, we see pulmonary edema, we see ascites, which is the fluid that builds up in and around the lungs, which is not supposed to be there, or in and around the peritoneal cavity. And so as the glycocalyx breaks down, the water is not held in place. It free flows in your body, and it causes a lot of electrolyte imbalances, and it basically causes disturbance to the normal function of the cell. So what I'm saying is that we've given sugar the power of your energy production, but it's actually not directly your energy production, in my opinion. It has more to do with the function of the cell and the electromolecular energy it contains, which we see, I think, in nature, out in the environment we all live in.
I think it could be both. I definitely think me personally, I think we definitely make use of glucose. The one, getting back to the glycocalyx first. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I haven't gotten to the story of why I believe glucose is not our energy.
Okay,
and that part is because we're not talking about it.
Right. And let me pause you on that for just a sec. So I will say this, as far as my understanding of the glycocalyx and what I tend to find so fascinating about it, but does work into what you're describing, is it's often, there's a lot of interest in the glycocalyx with regard to what functions it can provide to the cell in a kind of receptor-like fashion. What I find fascinating is I think the level of density, and given more of what I've seen in the more recent papers, is its function quite literally as kind of a slick fur, if you will, that it helps to move things along. And in the case of the endothelium, as opposed to you're speaking a lot more on the epithelium, which goes back to the gut, which gets to the epithelial cells and so forth. And the endothelium, that becomes extremely relevant when you're trying to move things through like coronary arteries or things like that.
Right. Well, it's the mucopolysaccharide layer, which is made of sugar. But every cell of every body, every cell of every organism, every cell, even every membrane has a glycocalyx. The most important one that I know about is the glycocalyx of the egg and the sperm. When the glycocalyx is damaged, they can't fertilize.
Okay. So that's really awesome.
Again, it's the glycocalyx science is the most amazing science because your immune system has a transmitter receiver and a barcode, and it's a key and a lock. The key and a lock is the sugar. This is why most of our diseases exist, because our diet, the biggest problem in our world is prediabetes and diabetes. We'll say obesity, but I don't believe obesity is the problem. But how do people get fat?
Right. Like insulin resistance.
They're eating plants, not insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. I'm giving you radical different here.
Yeah.
You want to get the same story? I'm not the guy. I'm giving you something very different. And the reason is, so tell me about hepatogenous diabetes.
Don't know what that is.
Ask the question, hepatogenous diabetes and the glycocalyx. For most people, it's very small or not at all in the keto carnivore space and nutritional space. So I couldn't figure out. So I read a book a long time ago, The World Turned Upside Down, by Richard David Feynman. And the book said glucose is never required for your diet. I'm like, okay, that's not what I was taught, because glucose is your energy, so it must be part of our diet, right? And I was like, okay, let me figure this out. Now, my sister died of diabetes. I know why she died. She had no insulin. She was type 1 since age 4. My friend Dave Kilmer dies of cancer, 52. Lymphoma. Rob, I got cancer. 3 months later, he's dead. Healthiest guy you'll ever know. Smartest guy you'll ever know. The kindest guy you'll ever know. So I asked the question, why did he die? Now, before medical school, Jim Slotnick died. Jim is a healthy 24-year-old, first year medical school. He's got nystagmus in his eye. He's got a glioblastoma. 3 years later, he's dead. Healthy guy. So I began to ask the question, well, why are we all sick and dying and healthy people are dying? And so when I found paleo diet, it's like, okay, I'm beginning to get a little sense of diet's important. And then I found keto and I found carnivore. And I personally have been carnivore for 15 years. Am I 100% strict? I mentioned no. But I eat a lot of fat. And fat suppresses the microbes in your gut. The microbes in your gut are not good. They're deadly. But they're everywhere. So we're telling a story about the microbes, the microbiome, how important it is for you. Well, we're only telling it based on our theories and our observations. But do you know that people have a sterile gut? If you could take an organism and sterilize their gut, they live longer. So I was like, okay, and the major diseases of the world are caused by microbes. So there's some good parts, they're there, okay? But we're imagining, well, they're good ones. You know, I imagine when the U.S. went into Vietnam, they were considered the good army. What happened to that one, right? So I just question it all. So when I found out...
But this is new information to me. So you can sterilize the gut of an animal and they'll live longer.
That's correct.
If they...
Now they stay in a sterile environment, and none of us live in a sterile environment, but basically the microbes are everywhere. Bacteria, viruses, and many of the microbes. That doesn't mean they're neither good nor bad. We evolved with them. But we speak of them in science and medicine to sell you another pill, an idea that says, oh, they're really good for you. But I know in my business, there are a lot of microbial infections, and cervical cancer we think is caused by HPV, vaginitis, vaginosis, cystitis, which is bladder infection. You know how many women die of renal infections every year? Tremendous. Men and women die of these things every day. So the microbes are there, they're good, but then they're not. Well, why are they causing such havoc? That was my question. But again, the glycocalyx was a mystery to me. I didn't know the importance of it. Oh my God, Carolyn Bertozzi won a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago on the glycocalyx. How do you make a COVID vaccine?
No. See, okay, I got a
glycocalyx. You change the sugar layers, and that is such an easy, amazing pharmaceutical thing to do. You change the sugar, you change the function.
Gotcha.
How easy is that? It is so easy to do that. That's the magic here. Change your amino acid, that doesn't matter, because your outward expression of all of your genes is a sugar, not a protein. Because your blood type's determined, HLA is determined by a sugar. So now I had to figure out the glycocalyx. How important was it? When I figured that if you damage the glycocalyx of a sperm or an egg, guess what it can't do? Fertilize. If you change the embryo's glycocalyx or the endometrial glycocalyx, guess what it can't do? Implant an embryo. Do we have sperm and egg and embryo problems today? Huge. More infertility today than ever before. Why? I don't know.
So it's not, and I think you're driving to an important point in that it's kind of just assumed people are choosing not to have children as much as they did before.
Oh, I'm busier than you'll ever know. And I will tell you, there's more sexual dysfunction, male impotence, no sperm, bad sperm, poor swimming sperm, and mental illness over the what I believe is ultimately our diets, our mind diet, our mouth diet, and their emotion diet. What are you putting into your life? What are you doing with your life? And we're here sharing ideas that are radical. What do you mean glucose isn't your energy? Or the liver's function is to make fat, not to detoxify your body, by the way. And hepatitis diabetes is the cause of insulin resistance.
So unpack that. What is How do you say it again?
Hepatogenous.
Hepatogenous.
Diabetes.
Okay.
Right? Type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Well, what if the liver's function is to make fat?
I mean, it does do that. You're talking de novo lipogenesis, right?
Well, when you say the word de novo lipogenesis, okay, meaning that, so when you eat amino acids and you eat sugars, where do those substances go? They go to the hepatic portal vein. Where does the hepatic portal vein go?
To the liver.
All the liver. Why would it go to the liver? Okay, when you eat fat, where does it go? The lymphatics, through chylomicrons. Why? Think of a chylomicron as a super packed VLDL. Amino acids, simple sugars, fatty acids, minerals, and vitamins. It packs through the lymphatics. It goes right to the heart, and then it goes where? Every cell of your body. Why? Because that's the delivery truck of every mineral, vitamin, and building block of your body. Okay, now why would amino acids and sugars go to the liver? And why would the pancreas dump its bloodstream right to the liver? Because in the liver, insulin converts amino acids and sugars to fat, and then it makes a VLDL, and it delivers it to every cell of your body.
But don't enterocytes also absorb sugars, glucose? Like carbohydrate. Aren't we ultimately also pulling a lot through the gut as well?
Okay, so if you ate food, nature's food, without industrialization, without plastics, without smog, I don't know how long ago you'd have to go back, you ate animals and you ate plants. Okay? How many toxins are in the animals you're eating?
I mean, a lot more now.
Where we go back before now.
I see what you mean.
You're eating a cow. Let's take a cow. Or you're eating a mammoth, right? It's easy to kill or hard to kill?
Hard to kill. Okay, well, mammoth, yeah.
Okay, so they're hard to kill.
Harder to kill than a plant.
They're hard to kill, but low in toxins. Plants are easy to kill and high in toxins. Heroin, cocaine, marijuana, nicotine, caffeine come from where? Plants. Cyanide comes from plants. The birth control pill and the abortion pill, where do they come from initially? Yams. That's how we discovered progesterone and estrogens. And then we added equine estrogens also. But ultimately, the plants we eat contain all of the chemicals that we now have made pharmaceutical devices out of. Plus, which one mostly contains a lot of fiber, plants or animals?
Oh, definitely plants.
So would you put a lot of poorly or non-digestible substances in your body? And for what reason?
Well, getting to where I think you're going, certainly if your thought process is fiber is necessary, or your thought process is I need to feed my gut microbiome, then you're interested in getting more plants, right?
Well, I don't even know about the microbiome because I don't have a microscope yet. And so let's just go back. See, sometimes too much knowledge actually takes us down a very, very steep slope and maybe a cliff on it. And that's where science takes us quite often. Well, the science says this and the randomized study says this, but ultimately we know that science is imperfect and studies are imperfect, and human beings sometimes like to fudge the science in order to sell a pill, a drug, or a doctor, a dissection or something like that. But let's get back to hepatogenous diabetes. So if in fact the liver's job is primarily to convert amino acids and simple sugars via insulin to fat, would you say in general it's doing a good job? Because most people eat a plant protein low fat diet. Now, I think most fast food is actually low fat, not high fat, because when you boil fries, potatoes in water and take them out, drips out the water, you're getting a lot of water when you eat that fry, the potato. You're not. When you take those fries out of the fat, you're basically boiling at a higher temperature. They're not containing more fat. Basically, most of our diet is a low-fat diet. And so the majority of what gets in our body must go to the liver and via insulin must be converted to fat. Because when you eat a high protein diet and you don't exercise, do you build muscles?
High protein diet and don't, well, I mean, it's
high protein, no exercise, no resistance work. You don't build muscle, you build fat. That's why we're so obese. Again, the majority of our problem is a high plant, low fat diet, 3 to 6 meals a day. We're feeding the liver with amino acids and sugars, which are converted to fat, because fat is what your body wants, because historically it's used to no food every day. It's used to famines. It's used to having to go for a long time to hunt for food, because our biggest problem is abundance of food, easy access to food. If 50,000 years ago you came across a beautiful ripe apple tree, you're going to say you're going to have one apple and wait a week? Because in a week, the apples will be all rotted and gone. Your job is to eat as much as you can, because there's only one place for the food, and that's fat on your body. So your body can siphon the amino acids, simple sugars, fatty acids, minerals, and vitamins that provide the energy and the building block for every cell of your body. That's really the simple story. Now, if you have bad cirrhosis, are you fat or skinny?
I'm not as familiar with cirrhosis.
So cirrhosis is basically you've lost liver function, and in general, you're skinny, you're emaciated, you're cachectic, you're sarcopenic, but you have a fat belly. Why? Ascites, the glycocalyx.
So you have a fatty liver?
So not fatty liver. The liver goes from a normal liver, we'll call it fatty liver, to fibrotic liver, to cirrhotic liver, to end-stage cirrhosis, where basically if you don't get a liver transplant, you're dead. And our liver transplants on the rise in this world, huge. Like kidney transplants and heart transplants and all sorts of transplants, they're on the rise. Okay, so now you go to the doctor, they say, well, eat more fruits and vegetables. How many meals a day? 3 to 6 meals a day. So that means since the day you're born to the day you die, is your gut ever empty of food?
No.
Never empty.
No.
So think of the gut as a bucket. You're always siphoning what off of the bucket? Amino acids and simple sugars. The fat's already gone into the lymphatics, but the amino acids and sugars go through the hepatic portal stream into the liver. What happens to it in the liver? You make fat. Now, you can't make fat very readily because it's the liver cells that make fat. So what happens to your insulin levels and your glucose levels? They rise. Okay, so now what if insulin resistance is the early onset of liver hepatocyte damage? As the hepatocytes drop in function, you can't convert the sugars to fat fast enough, all right? So I believe that insulin is a digestive hormone, because if you don't eat food, what's your insulin level? I did 2 weeks without food. My insulin was under 1 and my glucose was 45 to 65.
Right.
I went to work every day. I did my hiking. I flew my plane. I did everything. I wasn't weak. I wasn't disabled. I did not walk around with a mindset as like, I got to eat, I got to eat, I got to eat. I said, I'm healthy and well, and I'm hunting. When I find the food, I eat it. And I had my 2 weeks already labeled. But it was sort of like getting to understanding hepatitis diabetes is real, but we don't talk about it. The glycocalyx and the glycobiome is like the most important thing, because when you damage the immunoglobulins, you're damaging the sugar layer of the immunoglobulin. The sugar layer is the lock and key that identifies something. And so the microbes are really amazing. They know how to change your glycocalyx. And what they do is they change their glycocalyx so that you think they're friend. and not foe. And so they get into your DNA and they lay their label there and they reproduce there because they're affecting your immune system that doesn't allow them to kill you, to kill them.
So there's microbial incorporation of DNA.
Well, I believe all microorganisms essentially affect our DNA because they're, viruses basically incorporate their DNA into our DNA in order to replicate themselves. And the likelihood is we've evolved based on all these microbes. They're part of our evolution.
I thought they kind of hijacked the ribosomes directly with regard to viruses, but
they change your stop and start codons. They change your translation and transcription of your proteins, but they also change their ability in order to reproduce within you. Now, I don't know all the exact science of that, but I step back and ask the question, how come I could go 2 weeks without food and my glucose levels, I'm not fainting or falling down? How come my liver, what if we're type 2 diabetes, and when we call it fatty liver, the liver cells have a lower turnover of those sugars into fat. What happens to insulin levels? They rise. Glucose levels rise, right? More glycation, more damage, right? Now, why some people get more damage than others, I mean, my daughter is allergic to a banana and an avocado. How many people are allergic to peanuts? We're allergic to the sugar component of a cell, not to the protein component of the cell, which is a very interesting radical concept and we've been taught. Just ask the question. That's all I do in life is ask the question. I'm not saying it's the other science is wrong, but are we questioning a lot of science?
Well, I'm always in favor of questioning a lot of science.
Yeah.
I'll concede. For me, I'm more of the mind that when the liver's making fat, when there's de novo lipogenesis, as I understand it to be, if it's manufacturing fat, there's probably a problem.
No.
That there's that or let me put it this way.
Impossible.
Unless you're in a state of abundance for what you're storing. Getting back to like the menu you were talking about where they're like saying having fruit, for example, they're fattening up for the coming winter where there's going to be more of a famine. That's it. But like if you talk to somebody who's got ready access to food right now, they're already overweight, and you had a meter for de novo lipogenesis, the higher the de novo lipogenesis in each person, the more likely that there's a problem if they're already overweight.
Well, I don't agree with that because many animals do not get obese and fat, 1,000 pounds, they're dead. Hibernation, migration. So what are the odds that you migrated thousands and thousands of miles over your infinite human lifespan? Lots. Again, if you cannot make fat, you die.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that.
But my point is that what happens to the amino acids and sugars that you digest 24/7, 365? Because the majority of people have food in their gut all the time. And so wait a minute, I'm building muscle. No, you're not. You cannot build muscle without resistance work. Impossible. Or you're adding testosterone to your diet, which a lot of people do that. But ultimately, again, if you cannot make fat, type 1 diabetics cannot make fat, they die. Cirrhotic patients cannot make fat, they die. And so now the majority of human beings are eating as if there's no food tomorrow. Why? Because that's their infant evolution. We are living in a time of abundance, but our brain does not know that there's food tomorrow.
Totally agree on that. I think it's the name of Rob Wolf's book is Wired to Eat or something to that
Absolutely.
effect. We have, throughout our evolution, our primary problem was the getting of the food, not the having too much.
How long ago, and today even, finding food is very difficult. So we're living in a marketing world that basically your brain is smarter than you. It knows that bomb may fall, that infection may hit and there's no food, and the fat will survive.
Have you heard of the show Alone?
Yes.
Dude, I love that show. And sure enough, the contestants who know they're going to be on it, sorry, I should level set for anybody listening to this. Basically, the gist is they grab genuine survivalists, people who actually have the skill set to theoretically go out into the wilderness, and they put them in these very tremendously difficult conditions. Like there's an area that was up in Alaska, there's one in Mongolia, there's just like these crazy places. And they're each separated by miles, I think, or something to that effect. And then they're kind of monitoring them, but basically the contestants themselves are supposed to monitor themselves they have to constantly have a camera on them, usually multiples, while they're doing survivalist stuff. Well, getting back to the food, they know, and they often fatten up in advance of it happening because all of them are losing weight without exception. Nobody succeeds at getting the amount of food that could maintain their weight right away. Go ahead.
We are hunters and we are gatherers. I did a TEDx talk a number of years ago, and my story is basic. It's called the Lion King diet, basically, right? We came out of the trees not to eat the grass, but to eat the grass eaters. We hunted in packs. We're smart as shit. We figured out how to hunt like a wolf or a lion and to make tools. We cannot thrive and survive alone. That is our death. It's a very rare entity. And remember, you better be in a tribe that knows how to hunt, and they can walk a long way. And ultimately, we are built to get fat. But again, we didn't have access to the amount of food we have today. And what is the recommended healthy diet? Fruit, fiber, vegetables, seeds, and nuts, and how many meals a day? 3 to 6 meals a day. That is the worst recommendations by our profession. And ultimately, I mean, I do 1 meal a day or less. So I'm 2 days of no food right now. I've never felt better in my life. Okay, I had a coffee with some cream today. I've been off coffee for 2.5 years and I went back. So a little bit, but I would tell you that we are built to fast. And fasting is one of the best things we can do for our bodies because it empties the gut. It reduces the circulation of amino acids and simple sugars from your diet, which now allows autophagy to show up because you're not adding the toxins, which mostly people eating plants, which increase fermentation in the gut, which increases the microbial growth in the gut, which basically those microbes, they damage the glycocalyx of the gut. They go right into the common hepatic and bile ducts, the pancreatic ducts. So they infect our organ systems. They go up the esophagus. They infect the tonsils, the adenoids, the upper and lower respiratory systems. Right? If you look around the globe, what are the major killers of the world? It's diarrhea. It's pneumonias. It's upper and lower respiratory systems. And we know that infectious diarrhea is very common. And the biggest problem is the microbes, which we're basically feeding immensely, especially in our Western world. Again, antibiotics are good for us and they're bad for us, right? But ultimately, would you rather be the one that didn't get the antibiotic and turned out to be die from it? Because resistance might be real, but our biggest problem is our 3 to 6 meals of lean meat and plants, which fuel the microbes, which are biggest killers.
That's fascinating. Actually let's get back to the timeline for a sec.
Yeah.
You get this practice going. You're reading up on paleo. When did you actually start saying, I want to apply this to patients? Patients who may not have heard of diet being an actual application.
Well, let's go back 25, 30 years ago when I started looking at acupuncture and mindset and positivity and yoga. The moment I found those things for myself, I wanted to incorporate them for my clients, my patients, human beings, my brothers and sisters, realizing that, wait a minute, I'm healing from these ideas. I want to share them with my patients because I'm a doc. My job in life is to help people heal. I didn't go into medicine to make money. I went in business to make men, mommies, masters, and build families. And so when I found paleo diet, I'm like, okay, like I'm healing. I want to share it. I began to write about it and blog about it. I had a blog called Mind, Body, Smile 25 years ago, and I would blog about it every day. I wrote books on daily intentions, inspirations, and all those things. I wrote a book called The Fertile Secret, which is a takeoff on Rhonda Byrne's book, The Secret, The Power of Mindset. So then paleo, I started writing about paleo, and I started writing about keto, and then I found carnivore nearly 15 years ago, and like I share all of it. I think all of them helpful, whether you're Mediterranean or herbivore or carnivore, they all help in one way. And so to me, the best thing I can do is be on with you and sharing these concepts and ideas. And I didn't believe anything I'm telling you. I practiced it. I did it. I share it. And it works sometimes and it doesn't work others. Why one person or another, I don't know that answer. But I would tell you that the most important thing is mindset. The mind is the master. As you say, so shall ye be. Meditation, prayer, positivity, and we're at service and helping each other. And that's it. And then I found the diet and I'm like, whoa, amazing.
Do you find that this has been well accepted by your peers?
Everyone believes me 100%. There's a guy named Jesus Christ. Among Muhammad, Moses, Abraham, Buddha, Lao Tse, all of the sages of the universe. And so did they believe them when they first came onto the scene? They did not. These ideas are radical. Remember, human beings are built to believe the story they've been taught since they were a little child. That's why science, it's very difficult for scientists to be open-minded. They're very close-minded. And they believe, well, the science is right. Well, then I remind them, well, wait a minute. Science is always changing. Well, if it's always changing, how come you're right today but wrong tomorrow? Well, because it's a thought. And that's why I tell people the power of positivity and visualization mindset will master everything. I don't care what diet you are. But if you add the diet, and so, I don't care whether you believe me or not, but I can tell you the most important thing is building a family, whichever it's your family or helping your other family members or other community members have built families. That's what we're here to do. Live and lead a better life. And that's what I'm here to do every single day.
That show I mentioned earlier, Alone, if you've watched it, that there's a lot of people who seem to actually have the skill set. They don't run into some health problem, but they really cannot stand being away from their family. They concede it. They go, I'm checking out. They've got a little, satellite button that they can hit. Say, I can't. I thought I could, but it looks like you can't.
We are herd animals. That's our nature. Small herds. So one of my favorite books is, Clan of the Cave Bear. It's like back to our ancient nature, and Ayla, she's amazing. And ultimately we're hunters. We are killers in some way, but we're also lovers, and we care for our community, and we will fight and die for that. And so I'm sharing a story that doesn't fall in line even with my keto carnivore brothers and sisters. But from my studies, hepatitis, diabetes, so that's wild. The glycocalyx, that's wild. Microbes, they do want to make you fertilizer or food for themselves or something else, ultimately. And again, we're all in evolution of eternity because we're energy. We're a chemical reaction. We're electromolecular energy. It's back to the glycocalyx. It's a charge. It's energy charges. Like repels and opposites attract. A positive and negative charge. That's why when you damage the glycocalyx, you now cause stickiness. And would you say that fat is sticky or sugars are sticky?
Well,
Sugars.
yeah.
Sugar is sticky. And by the way, most amino acids, and think about deoxyribonucleic acid. What's it made of? Sugar. RNA, sugar. Every cell of your body, every cell of every organism has a tremendous amount of sugar.
To be fair, it also has a lot of fat.
No.
A lot of phospholipids.
Okay, no. Okay. A cell with no glycocalyx is dead.
True.
A
cell with no cholesterol is dead.
Right, but there is no existence of that, because ultimately, forget taking the drugs and the diet, your body knows how to make fat. That's what insulin is for, and that's what the liver is for. But every cell of every organism contains a glycocalyx. What is the shell of an insect made out of? Sure. Again, what is heparin made from? Sugar. Again, these are the things the glycocalyx is critical for. And without a glycocalyx, it's far more important than fat. Fat is in every cell of every organism, but it's the sugars that attach to these things that give you the expression of your DNA. And without that, and if you try to just simply understand the problem in modern life for humans and all other animals, by the way, dogs and cats get every disease you and I get. Is a dog and cat evolved from a wolf and a lion? Yes. Are they carnivores? Yes. But standard dog and cat food contains a lot of plants. Human food contains a lot of plants. Remove significant plants, you remove the glycocalyx. That is the inflammatory component. Plants have a lot of mannose. Humans don't have a lot of mannose sugars. And there are 9 primary sugars that make up the glycocalyx. Basically, the sugar layer so every time you add a sugar to a protein, you give it a far greater, different function of that of that protein. So basically, there are so many amino acids that make so many proteins. But when you add a sugar layer and the infinite 9 chain sugars, you have trillions of different varieties of the expression. That's why the human evolution, all organs evolve because their glycocalyx changes, not their DNA. Because if you look at all organisms, we have nearly the same DNA of many other mammals, but our expression evolves through a glycocalyx change. That's my theory.
It's an interesting one. So you get the practice going along. You're potentially doing diet as something you're recommending, along with you were talking diet of the mind, diet of the mouth,
and the movement of your body.
And the movement of your body.
What you immerse your life in. So most people go to a job they don't like. And that's a negative energy. Cortisol and epinephrine creates stress and damage and inflammation in your body. I don't care what you do, love it first. And then if you want to do something else, visualize that and you will go do that. But the mindset is the most important part. Then the diet absolutely affects and improves our body, I believe. And whether it's keto, carnivore, paleo, find something that seems to work for you. I believe carnivore and one meal is best. But now,
I think it's a little bit of a challenge only because I've come to really appreciate how diet affects your mind, affects your decision making to an extent. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg.
Are you 50?
A little over. Yeah.
2, 3?
2.
Okay. I'm 69 plus. I agree with you and I disagree with you. Look at why some people live longer or healthier than others. We don't know that answer. I think when I went carnivore, it opened up my brain even more. I think diet is important, but I think mindset still is one of those most amazing magics of the universe.
I think we agree more than it may seem.
Oh, yeah.
It's what I'm saying is that there are decisions that I make that I thought had nothing to do with the diet I was eating at the time, that the me of today would go, ooh, when I eat badly, I make generally not as good decisions as when I'm eating better.
I never eat badly. Do you know why?
Helps out.
Do you know why? I never give bad thought to what I put in my mind or my mouth. See, it all starts with what you think of what you eat, what you think of what you think and live in, and what you think of what you do. The mind is truly the most amazing part of the story. And again, meditation, prayer, visualization, and positive thinking. Now, again, the beauty is that's why these conversations are so much fun, because we don't always say, yeah, I agree with you. Let's move on and go play some game and be done with it, because this attracts people to the conversation. I didn't believe everything I'm telling you way back when, because I'm a doctor. I know the answer. I've got the degrees.
I did the training.
I
talked to the best people in the world.
Oh my God. See, we are attracted to a belief system. And then we fall in line with the community that has a similar belief system. It's like a club.
I also believe we're attracted to authority. A degree with which I can say, hey, I trust you. Can you shortcut this for me? Can you just tell me what I'm supposed to do so that I don't have to put in as much effort?
Well, I wanted to be a doctor. In order to be a doctor, I had to fall into line in the undergraduate work, the graduate work, the residency, internship, residency, and post-residency and fellowship and practice. So if you don't stay in line, you could lose your license, your privileges at a hospital. I've already been reported to the state for my conversation on keto carnivore, and to the hospital from a doctor that basically had bad diabetes. He lost a limb. And then after he told me I couldn't talk about it anymore, he asked me, hey, Kiltz, could you tell me a little bit about this diet? Now, he was just following orders from above that said, tell Kiltz he can't talk about this anymore. Because why? Because it doesn't fall in line with the standard story. But at 41, I lost a job. I had no money. I built a business plan. I went to the bank, borrowed some money, started my own practice. I went from just me answering phones to over 700 staff. I own and run CNY Fertility. I'm creating a non-for-profit because my job is really to create an entity that will continue on, because it's not to disrespect to anyone investing in business and venture capital money, but I want to see it to work a different way. If I can help it work with the mindset and ideas that you're sharing and that I'm sharing and many others are sharing, hopefully we can help inspire everyone that's listening or watching to take responsibility and own their own life. What comes with that is that now you get a certificate that says, I studied the same stuff Kiltz studied, and I don't have to be accepted to medical school. By the way, it's all online. You know, you can get it for pretty much free these days and learn more than I ever did from the comfort of wherever you want to be in this world. And then, but I was attracted to the authority because I thought they had all the answers. And when my sister died of diabetes, my best friend Dave dies of cancer, many other people that I see couldn't get pregnant or they even died of cancer, I question everything about what we say, everything. Even keto carnivore, even glucose is your energy, which I believe is incorrect.
Can you unpack what happened with the keto carnivore? You were saying that effectively you were getting reported? Is that right?
Well, when I find something that I can help you conceive and deliver a baby, even without me, I'm going to share it. So I work at a university where I do my surgeries, and there are a lot of residents and medical students. And so first thing I like to ask my residents and my medical students, what causes disease? And the answer is usually, I don't know. And I say, well, could your diet be the cause of disease? Well, no, I eat a healthy diet. Okay, what is a healthy diet? And fruit, fiber, vegetables, seeds, and nuts. And so I go down this thing. And then I only eat meat. I eat one meal a day. I've never felt better. And I shared this with my patients. And I believe that, again, plants are poisonous. And so I did that enough. I somehow disrespected some or insulted some people.
But the way you describe it now, you're just talking about your own experience to other people. You're not, were you telling people you need to do what I'm doing. You
Oh,
need
no.
to.
I never tell anyone to do what I do.
Right.
I'm simply a storyteller. But sometimes when you tell a story, people then take it personal, like you're telling them what to do.
I'm very familiar with this issue.
I remind people every day, okay, I'm giving you a story. Don't take it personally. I'm loud, I'm dramatic, but I care about one thing. You succeeding in this life, whatever way you want to do it. And so I was reported, and then they said you couldn't talk about it. And then the state called me in and said, Dr. Kiltz, we've got to talk to you about a few things. I had no idea what it was. Then when I got to the state licensing board, Dr. Kiltz, thank you very much for coming here. It's about your diet, and we understand your beliefs on this. It's okay. We just had to call you in because we're required to do that. They were very nice about it, actually.
Huh.
And so even again, the doctor who was given the job of telling me to shut up, even asked me questions about it. And so the beauty is I find so much fun in this storytelling because, wait a minute, the liver's job is to detoxify, right? And if so, tell me what it detoxifies.
So
name a disease that it detoxifies. You can't.
So do you feel like there's been more of a mainstream, I don't know if I'd say acceptance, but definitely a greater degree of tolerance towards keto and carnivore compared to, say, 3-5 years ago?
I do sometimes think there's more openness to keto and carnivore, but a little bit we're hearing some backlash to carnivore, maybe some to keto. Interesting enough, I just had a CAC score that went from 700 to 800 in 2 years, and a CT angiogram that had a little bit more plaque of some of my vessels. Although my heart function, my blood flow is great, I have no symptoms, but I do have high cholesterol and high LDL. And I fall into the lean mass hyperresponder story a little bit. And I brought up in my story, I said, could I be allergic to meat? I threw it out there, and maybe I should eat some vegetables. Then the next story was Kiltz gave up carnivore. I threw out questions. And I like to question even myself. Do I know that the carnivore diet or the keto diet is going to mean I'm going to live longer? I have no idea. And I think, I don't know if I'd call it a backlash, but there's lots of questions. And I think we're constantly asking questions because we don't really know the answer. I don't know that if you go keto or carnivore, it means you're going to live longer or not be sick. But my job as a doctor is take care of people who are sick who come to me. Now, interesting enough, most people say, I'm healthy and well, but I'm not conceiving and delivering a baby. Well, what are you born for? Only one thing, not to be a podcaster or a scientist or a doctor. You're born to reproduce. Every single organism is born for one thing, reproduction. And that's all you need to survive for is reproduction of yourself or your community. That's it. And so healthy people not reproducing, I then ask them, well, what do you eat? And the answer is, I eat healthy. I say, well, what is that? And then I go through, do you eat fruit, fiber, vegetables, seeds, nuts, salad, pasta, bread? The answer is yes, but they're organic and clean. I go, okay, I got it. I don't know what that means, but okay. And then it's like, do you eat fatty meat or lean meat? Well, everyone eats cooked meat. That means they're rendering the fat. They eat lean meat. It's called protein poisoning, rapid starvation. And so I have books and podcasts and TEDx talks where I say, hey, listen, I'll be glad to give you shots, pills, and surgeries, and you spend a lot of money on IVF or IUI or whatever it is. But if you want to do some other ideas, here they are. I never tell you what to do. My job is to share ideas, because who's in charge of you?
I am.
That's it.
Right.
Not me. You are. But I was in my Nashville office yesterday and I talked about this. And then I heard through another office that I was insulting people and telling stories that were crazy. And then I found out from the patient, she was really excited and loved to hear this story, but it's hard for many of us to hear this story.
To hear the story of
something that's not our story we grew up with.
Well, I mean, particularly if you've grown up with a particular kind of dish, right? A cuisine, things that you're used to from your family, that your family. I've been very humbled in this journey of mine coming into the space with just how attached we are to food at levels that's beyond just the enjoyment of the moment. There's all kinds of life structure built around it. There's all kinds of things the work. I remember when I first came here to Las Vegas, we had an advertising agency that I went and worked at, and famously, on Mondays they had bagels, and they went and got really nice spread of bagels from down the road, and it just had all the different whipped creams, spreads, and so forth that you could put on, and it felt like what they meant for it to feel like, which is it feels like love.
Yeah.
You feel like, wow, this place really cares about its employees. And I don't say that as a anti-carb person. On the contrary, I genuinely believe that's exactly what it was. But I think back to things exactly like that.
Yeah.
Because it was a large company, a lot of people. And a lot of times it felt like it was too many people. It's just too large. But that was one area where it felt like it was hugging us personally. Food is powerful that way.
Flatter him, feed him, make love to him. Simple little things. We tease them with the mind and the mouth, and ultimately reproduction is our primary goal in life. Why Beautiful People Have More Daughters is a great book, but ultimately everything we do is about reproduction. And no food, starvation, there is no reproduction. But we know that culturally food is critical to our lifestyles and our environments. And that's why we're all working to find ways in this keto carnivore lifestyle to live in a standard world, and it's not easy. But here's what I say about not easy. The most amazing things in life are hard, and you're born for hard. If it's painful and you're suffering, you're going in the right direction. But you need to build the mindset of the mastery of that and to see the beauty in all of it. But it's hard, and you are born for hard. And keto carnivore, is it mainstream? Fringy. Will it stay fringy? Absolutely. Because the majority of people aren't having the problems that you're having yet. The problem with predicting who's going to die when or of what is impossible for us, unfortunately.
I think it's also just that it's a big ask. Like I think low carb is, as a concept, is not hard when we're talking, say, under 120 grams, under 100 grams. You have to be mindful of it. You need to get the sodas out. But that's not as hard as going actual keto. My family's used to me using this term actual keto because they're kind of like, well, no, I loaded up on the keto snacks, and I was like,
if it says keto, it's okay.
Right. Exactly. And I have this one rule, which is you can test any food that you think is keto by eating it all day and then testing your glucose in the morning. If you could eat that food all day long and your glucose in the morning is lower, probably it's keto.
But I question even that, because you can glucose is not meant to be flat line. That's unhealthy. Because
we may debate on this one.
Well, that's what we're here to do.
Yes, go ahead.
So you're a standard human animal, and you're hunting and gathering. You're grazing all day with grass? No, you're not. That's a deadly diet. You're an ancient hunter. You hunt and you feast. Feast and fasting. So when you have that feast, amino acids and simple sugars rise in the in the bloodstream. Insulin rises. It all goes to the liver, and in the liver it's converted to fat, because now you're going to be fasting for the next day, 2 or 3 potentially, all right? Or you're feasting for 3 days straight, and then you're fasting for a week or so. Now, again, I'm telling a story, but I go back to the people that are alone and naked. Go hunt and gather and find food. There's no farms, there's no ranches, there's no supermarkets. When we developed agriculture, that helped our food freedom tremendously. But the masters of the story knew how to control the masses by feeding them plants and beer, bread and beer. You control the masses, you create the armies, you control the rest of your environment, and civilizations grow. But I think that glucose levels naturally rise. But the problem is, what's the recommended diet for humans today? 3 to 6 meals a day. Your glucose is never drops. So that means you always have elevated glucose. Okay. If you have elevated glucose, what hormone rises to a digestive glucose or amino acids? Insulin. In order to do what? Make fat in the liver. Fatty liver disease is very common. Well, when we call it fatty liver disease, we're really adding elevated hemoglobin A1C or elevated glucose levels and fasting and all these things, and then more glycation diseases, arthritis, psoriasis, back problems.
I would counter insulin's predominantly shuttling away the glucose.
Okay.
I know.
I disagree. Okay, so I'm giving you Kiltz's theory.
Yes, Kiltz's
simple.
theory.
Look, this is Kiltz's theory, but it's hard to believe because, again, all I ask a scientist is to back up. If you don't eat for a week, what happens to insulin? It's low. See, glucose is water soluble. It goes right through the cell wall easily. Okay? So that's why in diabetic ketoacidosis, you have tremendous shifts in water and solutes, and you cause a lot of brain damage and you cause death, but not right away. Okay? And so the whole idea is that when you really dig deep and unpack the science, if you don't eat, if you are fat enough, you could live a year without any food. What's your insulin level? It's flat. It's low. Glucose levels flat and low.
Yep.
So just again, we're studying this in mostly a standard diet. And even if you're keto, very few people eat 1 meal a day or less. And when you find that study, it's hard. But when again, that's where I go to is if you're eating 3 meals a day and you're always making fat, well, that's because you must make fat in order to have energy for the mitochondria, because mitochondrial energy comes from acetyl-CoA. Now, no one has no fat, because if they do, they're dead fast. So acetyl-CoA is a 2-carbon particle. What is it cleaved from? Fatty acids. So when you cut a 2-carbon particle, how fast does it take to cut 2 carbon particles off of a fatty acid? Light speed. Because how fast do you need acetyl-CoA to make ATP? Light speed. All right. I don't think lack of ATP is our problem. I think glycation is our biggest problem. And I think that when we talk about metabolic dysfunction, it's liver damage. The hepatocytes can't convert sugars and amino acids to fat fast enough. And if you're hyperglycemic, what does that do to your brain cells? It increases the concentration of glucose in the cell. It shifts water into the cell because it's the more sugar you pull water with it, because sugar pulls water. What does that do to the electrolyte and the pH of your brain cells? And then it tends to then try to change the pH by either concentrating, holding on to carbon dioxide, or pushing it out, because those are the primary pH shifters. And that's why you breathe harder or you breathe slower. It's physiology. It's biochemistry.
I love biochemistry, it's fascinating because when I got into the space, it's probably one of the most common comments I've made is just that as an engineer, I am in awe at how complex the human body is. It's just incredible.
Otto Warburg and Hans Krebs. Who did they work for? Universities. Did they have to publish or perish? You better believe they did. Can you trust their science any more than you could trust the science today? Not one bit. Because was Rockefeller and Bayer big money at that time? You better believe they were. And so, did they get Nobel Prizes?
Those two?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Was that a very prestigious thing to have? Of course it was. Are they different human beings that we have then than today? Same. Money is the master. And publish or perish. Again, I'm not disqualifying their science, but I question all of it. Am I right or wrong? I don't know. But I'm a storyteller. When I learn about something that didn't make sense, I want us to tease it out. I'm a mathematician. I'm a scientist. But remember, we're teasing things out and putting them in a test tube or a petri dish, and we're coming up with the story. But now let's throw it into the cytoplasmic milieu or the nuclear milieu and try to understand what's really happening. Why does all the blood flow from the gut go to the liver?
I mean, when you say all the blood flow?
All the blood flow of the gut goes to the liver. All of it. Why? Because anatomy and function go together. Let's just say we're omnivores. Does a plant cell have fat in it?
Very little.
Nope. Didn't say how much. What's the cell membrane made out of a plant cell?
Well,
phospholipids. Okay? Does the embedded phospholipid have amino acids and proteins? Yes, it does. Does it also have simple sugars and complex sugars? The glycocalyx. It does. A plant makes chemicals to attract and repel. And it's critical for its function also, right? But when we ate food 50, 100,000 or 500,000 years ago, I don't even know when or what we ate. Do you? I don't. We had to break down every cell we ate, whether it's from a microbe, whether it's from a plant or an animal, and we had to separate them into amino acids, simple sugars, and fatty acids, correct? So for infinite, and you go to all animals pretty much, right? They have a liver. Those that are mammals have livers, and many other animals. The liver must convert them to fat or you die. And so there is this Occam's razor. Simple answer is the one. See, we in science like to make complicated stories. Well, those are the authorities. They know more than you and I. They've got this. Are we getting sicker or healthier? Is the cost of healthcare going up or down? Are more and more people suffering at younger and younger ages? You better believe they are. Is there a simplicity to sharing this story online that we can help people take control of their own lives? And again, don't believe me. But if you're suffering, do something different than you're doing. I don't care if it's in the plant realm or animal realm or both. I don't care if it's in the theist or atheist realm where you're not sure, you're in the middle of the road. But we're learning from our brothers and sisters that have come before us. Think of the number of people you're related to. 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents and just go back and see how big that is. And there's nobody more important than you in this world. There's nobody smarter than you in this world. They have more knowledge and experience in one area over another. But I say question everything. Question Kiltz. He does not know what the shit he's talking about. But I question everything. And then I say, well, what if it were different? What if there were a different answer to this? Maybe. And spirit or science, which one is more powerful? I say faith is. Faith is the belief in the thing as if it is already or better. The mindset. We know when we look at someone's eyes and we think love and kindness and positivity, we send that vibrational energy. We know when we speak softly and kindly and listen, it's always a better conversation. Even when we disagree, that's the beauty of the universe for all of us. And I hope to leave this world that I live in a better place. And to be part of the conversation is the most important part of it, the community, right? Right or wrong, be kind.
I'm definitely somebody who's a big believer in that.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of science can be accomplished with killing people with kindness. There's so many things I've asked for from people that I feel it was a lot of it, as the saying goes, it was a lot more attraction with honey than vinegar.
Yeah. Caressing with kindness. Caressing with kindness.
I'll try to adopt that one.
Well, again, I've been using it because the more I've been using mindset first, my life is just, I visualize and it materializes. Or better. And when you always use the or better part of this, it's just magical. And that's the part I really love about this keto carnivore world, because I love nutrition. And, for me, it's rare to raw fatty meat. I love salt on it. Typically, I'll do my one meal a day, and some days it's just, I didn't eat, it's okay. Once in a while, I'll have something that is in the plant world. I don't lose my shirt over it. I don't think negative about it. I think it's just all God's love and energy. Because our bodies can break down the complex and the simple sugars and metabolize and utilize. But if you have an anaphylactic reaction to a plant sugar, it might be the last one.
Yeah.
But again, it's our job in as a doc, I want to listen and learn from you.
There's this running joke, by the way. Every mushroom is edible at least once.
Well, again, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, nicotine, caffeine, cyanide, they come from plants and microbes and mushrooms. And look, I'm not saying never do these things. Okay, maybe twice a year I have a cigar with my brothers when we have a steak and beautiful, I make some fries for them too, and my ice cream. But, it's from time to time. But I always give good, loving energy to everything that I do. And if it's something that I shouldn't be doing, I don't do it. But, it's all of us are temples, Ferraris. Each and every one of us is the most expensive, irreplaceable entity ever created. And I think what we're all working to teach and share the things that help us care for that thing in the way that it's meant to be cared for. And experiment on all of these ideas. Because my good friend, Dave, talks a lot about citizen scientists in the N of one, right? And how each of us are listening and learning, and then we're experiencing. And that's the part that I really love, hearing what you have to say and listening to the work you're doing. and invest in our lives. And that's why I think it's important to go to the meetings and invest in the podcasts and the seminars and the retreats and donate to not only your life, but helping others to be the very best they can every single day. So I appreciate you inviting me here today and listening to Kiltz's craziness.
That's very kind. No, I'm excited to have you. And thank you so much for coming on. How do people find you?
Kiltz, Kiltz, Dr. Kiltz, or Hey Kiltz, or just Google that somewhere out there and you'll find me in all worlds. And I'm very appreciative to be here and appreciative to everyone that's listening, and we're all learning together. And so thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.